You ever think about what if, what if we actually got a message from aliens?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Right. It's like one of those things everyone thinks about, I feel like.
Yeah, it's definitely a question that captures the imagination.
Totally.
Okay.
And that's what we're diving into today.
Really digging deep.
Yeah, what are the protocols? What do we think would happen? How would people react?
What would we even do?
Right. Is there a plan?
Well, there are some guidelines and protocols in place, believe it or not.
No way. Really?
Yeah, the NASA's even got some protocols.
What? Like they're expecting a visit or something?
Well, not expecting, but definitely prepared.
Right.
The history behind these protocols is actually pretty interesting.
Okay. I'm all ears.
Well, you remember the Apollo missions, of course.
Yeah, when we landed on the moon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When those astronauts came back, they didn't exactly get a ticker tape parade right away.
Oh, really? What happened?
Straight into quarantine.
Wait, they were quarantined, after walking on the moon?
Yep.
What? Why? Did they think there were, moon germs or something?
Not moon germs, but the possibility of something else. Something alien hitching a ride back to Earth.
Oh, wow. So they were worried about contamination.
Exactly. They called it back contamination. Scientists were seriously concerned about what could happen if unknown extraterrestrial life was brought back to Earth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we've all seen those sci-fi movies, right? Where some alien microbe wipes out humanity.
Right. So quarantine was like a precaution.
Wow. So they really took this alien life thing seriously.
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't just a passing worry either.
What do you mean?
Well, it actually led to some pretty big decisions.
Like what?
Remember the Galileo probe? The one that was sent to Jupiter?
Yeah, vaguely. I remember that.
Well, they deliberately crashed it into Jupiter.
Wait, they destroyed it on purpose?
Yep.
But why? It seems kind of dramatic.
It was to protect Jupiter's moons.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a chance, however small, that the Galileo probe, which wasn't sterilized, could have carried bacteria from Earth to those moons.
Ah, so they didn't want to risk contaminating a potentially habitable environment.
Exactly. They made the tough call to eliminate that risk.
Wow, that's a huge sacrifice for science. It really shows you how seriously they took and still take the idea of alien life, even microscopic life.
Right.
But, okay, let's say we do actually get a message from ET today, who's in charge. Is there an alien hotline that goes straight to the president?
Not quite that simple, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
There's no world leader designated for alien contact, but there are groups like SETI that search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They've been thinking about this for a long time.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of SETI. I know they use those giant radio telescopes.
Exactly. And they've actually developed something called the Declaration of Principles, outlining the steps to take if we ever receive a message from an alien civilization.
Whoa, hold on. A declaration of principles? We've got an instruction manual for talking to aliens.
It's more about procedures than greetings, but yeah, you could think of it that way.
So, what does it say? Does it tell us what language to use or how to address them properly? Dear esteemed extraterrestrial beings.
It's not that specific. It's more about things like independent verification of the message, informing the global scientific community and the UN, and, oh yeah, preparing for a media frenzy.
Oh, I can only imagine. The news would explode, social media would melt down, but okay, how would we even know if a message was the real deal? What if it was just some pranksters messing with us?
That's where the Rio Scale comes in.
The Rio Scale. Never heard of that.
It's a system for measuring the significance of potential alien evidence.
So a scale of how likely it is that the signal is actually from aliens.
Kind of. Think of it like the Richter scale, but for alien contact instead of earthquakes.
Okay, interesting. So how does it work?
Well, it considers a lot of factors, like the credibility of the signal, whether the observation can be repeated, the type of message, if any, and even the distance from the source.
Makes sense. I guess the further away the signal is, the less likely it is to be from aliens.
Well, it's more complicated than that, but you get the idea.
Right.
A good example is the Martian face. Remember that?
Vaguely. Wasn't that a rock formation on Mars that looked like a face?
Exactly.
Okay.
It could cause quite a stir when it was first discovered. On the Rio scale, it was initially given a 2, which means potentially significant, but later, with higher resolution images, it was downgraded to a 0. Turns out it was just a trick of light and shadow.
So the Rio scale helps us separate the real deal from the space oddities?
Precisely.
Makes sense. So we've got protocols for contamination, a guidebook for contact, and a scale for measuring alien evidence. We're practically ready for an intergalactic meet and greet. But here's a question: who actually gets to speak for Earth if we need to send a message back? Is there a designated alien ambassador, someone with impeccable intergalactic etiquette?
Well, that's a good question, and one that sparks a lot of debate.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There isn't really a single person designated to speak for Earth.
Really? So no official spokesperson for Earth. That seems like kind of a big gap in our alien strategy.
It definitely highlights some of the complexities we'd face.
Yeah. Right. Think about it if we received a message tomorrow. Who would decide how to respond? Would it be the UN scientists? World leaders? It kind of makes you wonder about disagreements and delays.
Yeah, it wouldn't be easy to find common ground on something like this.
It'd be like herding cats, only the cats are entire countries with different priorities.
Huh. A very apt analogy.
So, okay, let's move on to the actual message itself. If we did decide to respond, what should we say? Should we, like, try to explain our history, our culture? Or should we just ask them to beam us up?
Huh. Well, those are the million-dollar questions, and there are a lot of different ideas out there. Some scientists propose using universal languages like mathematics.
Oh, like math.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine sending the Fibonacci sequence, or pi.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like saying, hey, we're thinkers too. Check out our math skills.
Right. It demonstrates intelligence and a grasp of complex patterns.
But wouldn't that also kind of reveal our level of technological advancement? And wouldn't that be risky considering we don't know anything about these aliens?
That's a good point. There's definitely a school of thought that cautions against revealing too much, especially about our technology.
Yeah, that makes sense. Remember Stephen Hawking's warning about alien contact?
Oh, yeah, of course.
He compared it to Columbus arriving in America.
All right, which obviously didn't turn out so well for the Native Americans.
Yeah, it's a pretty chilling comparison, but it makes sense. I mean, throughout history, contact between civilizations with different levels of technology has often led to exploitation conflict and even the destruction of the less advanced culture.
Right, and that's something we need to be very mindful of when thinking about potential alien contact. Are we really prepared to take that risk on a cosmic scale?
It's definitely a sobering thought, but is the alternative just staying silent, pretending we're not home? What if we miss out on a chance to connect with a peaceful, advanced civilization?
That's the dilemma, isn't it? Silence versus the risk of contact.
Right, it's a tough one.
Some experts like Simon Conway Morris actually advocate for staying silent. He's a paleontologist, and he argues that if the cosmic phone rings, we should just let it go to voicemail.
Wow, that's a bold stance. To just ignore a potential message from another civilization. It's almost like a cosmic game of chicken.
Huh. I like that.
With the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, it really makes you think about what influences our decisions and reactions in a scenario like this.
That's where things get really interesting. Anthropologists have pointed out that we often Jetsons aliens.
Wait, Jetsons aliens? What does that mean?
It means we project our own anxieties, desires, and even our pop culture onto these imagined extraterrestrials.
Oh, I get it. So we're basically shaping our perception of aliens based on our own limited experiences and biases.
Exactly. Think about it. How often do we imagine aliens as either hostile invaders, like in War of the Worlds, or benevolent saviors like E.T.? It's pretty rare to see anything in between.
You're right, it's always, they're coming to get us or they're here to save us. There's not much nuance.
Right. And that actually tells us a lot about ourselves.
What do you mean?
Well, our tendency to imagine hostile aliens reflects our own history of conflict and our anxieties about the unknown.
Makes sense.
On the other hand, our desire for benevolent aliens who will solve our problems points to a deeper longing for solutions, for someone or something to come along and fix everything.
So basically, we're just projecting all our baggage onto these hypothetical aliens.
In a way, yes.
Mm.
Our fears, our hopes, it all gets reflected in how we imagine they might be.
It's fascinating how much our perception of the other reveals about ourselves.
It is. And it really highlights the need for some critical self-reflection, especially when dealing with something as unknown as potential alien contact.
Yeah, we need to be aware of our own biases.
Exactly.
It's like that saying, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. And that applies to how we see potential alien life, too.
Absolutely. The universe is a vast and complex place, and it's likely that alien intelligence, if it exists, would be just as diverse and multifaceted as life on Earth.
Okay, but let's bring this back down to Earth literally. You mentioned earlier that even the borders between countries are visible from space. That's an image that's really stuck with me. It's like a reminder of how divided we are.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not just metaphorical either.
Right.
You said the border between East and West Germany is still visible because of the different light bulbs they use?
Exactly. And the India-Pakistan border is illuminated at night, creating a bright line that's easily visible from orbit.
It's crazy to think that these scars of our divisions are literally etched onto the surface of our planet for anyone to see. It makes you wonder what an alien civilization would make of that.
It's a question that really sparks the imagination. Would they see it as a sign of our immaturity, our inability to overcome our differences? Or would they see something else entirely?
It's almost like a giant Rorschach test for any extraterrestrial observers. What they see probably says more about them than it does about us. It really is mind-blowing to think that all our little dramas down here could be like a beacon to the cosmos, for better or worse. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the whole alien contact thing, what's the biggest thing you hope our listeners take away from all this?
Hmm. You know, I think the most important thing is that just thinking about these possibilities is valuable in itself. Like it forces us to really examine what we think we know, to consider other perspectives, and to face those big questions about where we fit in the grand scheme of things, like who are we really? What matters to us? What are we doing with our little corner of the universe? They're not easy questions, but they're worth asking.
Yeah, it's almost like we're using the idea of aliens as a way to look at ourselves in a new way. And even if ET never phones home, that self-reflection can be really powerful.
Oh, totally. And it's also important to remember that there's no one right answer to how we should handle contact. It's complicated. There are no easy solutions. But by talking about it, weighing the pros and cons, really thinking it through, we'll be better equipped to make those decisions if or when that day comes.
So it's less about finding the perfect solution and more about asking the right questions and being open to different perspectives.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's about using this as a chance to learn and grow, both as individuals and as a species. Who knows? Maybe grappling with these big cosmic questions will help us become a little more thoughtful, a little more compassionate, a little more united.
That's a nice thought. That the possibility of meeting someone totally different could help us close the gaps between us right here on Earth. Well, it's been an amazing journey exploring all this, the protocols, the what ifs, and the human side of it all. And I gotta say, I'm walking away with more questions than answers, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Not at all. It's those unanswered questions that keep us curious, keep us looking for answers, keep us looking up at the stars and wondering. They remind us that there's so much left to discover both out there and within ourselves.
And that's a perfect place to leave it. So, to our listeners, I'll leave you with one last thing to think about. If you were calling the shots, what message would you send to an alien civilization? Or would you send one at all? It's a question worth considering, because as we've seen today, even our wildest what-ifs can tell us a lot about who we are and where we belong in this incredible universe.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking up, keep questioning, and keep exploring.